Originali.
Bentornati a Lingue Originali, questo è l'appuntamento dedicato alla lingua e alla letteratura inglese, col quale ritroveremo Marco Piovaz, il nostro insegnante di Torino, che già dall'anno scorso ci delizia, è il caso di dirlo, con un perfetto accento e stile British, accompagnandoci nel mondo della letteratura inglese. Avevamo pensato che i 4 episodi dedicati a Passaggio in India, A Passaggio to India di E.M Forster, proposti nel mese di ottobre, fossero abbastanza. Ma voi non siete stati d'accordo con questo punto di vista e ci avete chiesto di continuare. È per questo che anche per tutto il mese di novembre continueremo a viaggiare in India con Forster e con la voce di Marco Piovaz. Diciamo ancora qualcosa allora su A Passage to India, Passaggio in India. Lo avevo accennato, è l'ultimo romanzo scritto e pubblicato da Forster. La cosa molto particolare che distingue questo romanzo dagli altri è che l'ambientazione non è di quelle classiche. Forster aveva ambientato altri scritti in Inghilterra, anche in Italia o più generalmente in Europa, ma siamo giusto appunto in India. La critica ha definito Passaggio in India a novel between two silences, ovvero un romanzo tra due silenzi. Perché? Perché prima di scriverlo e pubblicarlo passarono 10 anni dal penultimo romanzo. Dopodiché Forster non avrebbe scritto e non ha scritto più nulla. E allora, un nuovo estratto, nuove pagine, nuove atmosfere da A Passage to India, Passaggio in India, di E.M Forster, la voce è quella di Marco Piovaz.
The third act of 𝐻𝐢𝐬𝐧𝐚𝐥𝐢 was well advanced by the time Mrs. Moore re-entered the club. Windows were barred lest the servants should see their �𝐻𝐸𝐬s acting, and the heat was consequently immense. One electric fan revolved like a wounded bird, another was out of order. Disinclined to return to the audience, she went into the billiard room, where she was greeted by "I want to see the real India," and her appropriate life came back with a rush. This was Adela Questit, the queer, cautious girl whom Ronnie had commissioned her to bring from England. And Ronnie was her son, also cautious, whom Miss Questit would probably, though not certainly, marry, and she herself was an elderly lady. I want to see it too, and I only wish we could. Apparently the Turtons will arrange something for next Tuesday. It'll end in an elephant ride, it always does. Look at this evening, Cousin Kate. Imagine, Cousin Kate. But where have you been off to? Did you succeed in catching the moon in the Ganges? The two ladies had happened the night before to see the moon's reflection in a distant channel of the stream. The water had drawn it out, so that it had seemed larger than the real moon and brighter, which had pleased them. I went to the mosque, but I did not catch the moon. The angle would have altered. She rises later. Later and later, yawned Mrs. Moore, who was tired after her walk. Let me think. We don't see the other side of the moon out here. No. Come, India's not as bad as all that, said a pleasant voice. Other side of the earth, if you like, but we stick to the same old moon. Neither of them knew the speaker, nor did they ever see him again. He passed with his friendly word through red brick pillars into the darkness. We aren't even seeing the other side of the world. That's our complaint, said Adela. Mrs. Moore agreed. She too was disappointed at the dullness of the new life. They had made such a romantic voyage across the Mediterranean and through the sands of Egypt to the harbour of Bombay to find only a gridiron of bungalows at the end of it. But she did not take the disappointment as seriously as Miss Quest did, for the reason that she was 40 years older and had learned that life never gives us what we want at the moment that we consider appropriate. Adventures do occur, but not punctually. She said again that she hoped that something interesting would be arranged for next Tuesday. Have a drink, said another pleasant voice. Mrs. Moore, Miss Quested, have a drink, have 2 drinks. They knew who it was this time, the collector, Mr. Turton, with whom they had dined. Like themselves, he had found the atmosphere of Cousin Kate too hot. Ronnie, he told them, was stage managing in place of Major Callender, whom some native subordinate or other had let down, and doing it very well. Then he turned to Ronnie's other merits, and in quiet, decisive tones said much that was flattering. It wasn't that the young man was particularly good at the games or the lingo, or that he had much notion of the law. But, apparently a large but, Ronnie was dignified. Mrs. Moore was surprised to learn this, dignity not being a quality with which any mother credits her son. Miss Quested learned it with anxiety, for she had not decided whether she liked dignified men. She tried indeed to discuss this point with Mr. Turton, but he silenced her with a good-humoured motion of his hand and continued what he had come to say. The long and the short of it is, 𝐻𝐿𝐲𝐿𝐲. He's the very type we want. He's one of us. And another civilian who was leaning over the billiard table said, Hear, hear. The matter was thus placed beyond doubt, and the collector passed on, for other duties called him. Meanwhile, the performance ended, and the amateur orchestra played the national anthem. Conversation and billiards stopped. Faces stiffened. It was the anthem of the Army of Occupation. It reminded every member of the club that he or she was British and in exile. It produced a little sentiment and a useful accession of willpower. The meagre tune, the curt series of demands and Jehovah, fused into a prayer unknown in England, and though they perceived neither royalty nor deity, they did perceive something. They were strengthened to resist another day. Then they poured out, offering one another drinks. Adela, have a drink. Mother, a drink. They refused. They were weary of drinks. And Miss Quested, who always said exactly what was in her mind, announced anew that she was desirous of seeing the real India. Ronnie was in high spirits. The request struck him as comic, and he called out to another passers-by, Fielding, how's one to see the real India? Try saying Indians, the man answered, and vanished. Who was that? Our schoolmaster, Government College. As if one could avoid seeing them, sighed Mrs. Leslie. I've avoided, said Miss Quested. Excepting my own servant, I've scarcely spoken to an Indian since landing. Oh, lucky you. But I want to see them. She became the centre of an amused group of ladies. One said, wanting to see Indians. How new that sounds. Another, natives. Why? Fancy. A third, more serious, said, let me explain. Natives don't respect one any the more after meeting one, you see. That occurs after so many meetings. But the lady, entirely stupid and friendly, continued, what I mean is, I was a nurse before my marriage and came across them a great deal, so I know. I really do know the truth about Indians. A most unsuitable position for any Englishwoman. I was a nurse in a native state. One's only hope was to hold sternly aloof, even from one's patients. Why, the kindest thing one can do to a native is to let him die, said Mrs. Callender. How if he went to heaven? Asked Mrs. Moore, with a gentle but crooked smile. He can go where he likes, as long as he doesn't come near me. They give me the creeps. As a matter of fact, I have thought about what you were saying about heaven, and that's why I am against missionaries, said the lady who had been a nurse. I am all for chaplains, but all against missionaries. Let me explain. But before she could do so, the collector intervened. Do you really want to meet the Aryan brother, Miss Quested? That can be easily fixed up. I didn't realize he'd amuse you. He thought a moment. You can practically see any type you like. Take your choice. I know the government people and the landowners. Hislop here can get hold of the barrister crew, while if you want to specialize on education, we can come down on Fielding. I'm tired of seeing picturesque figures pass before me as a frieze, the girl explained. It was wonderful when we landed, but that superficial glamour soon goes. Her impressions were of no interest to the collector. He was only concerned to give her a good time. Would she like a bridge party? He explained to her what that was, not the game, but a party to bridge the gulf between East and West. The expression was his own invention and amused all who heard it.
Come sempre grazie a Marco Piovaz per questa lettura. Questa è Lingue Originali, l'appuntamento per chi ci segue in diretta del venerdì dedicato già dalla stagione precedente alla lingua inglese. Ma vi ricordo che Lingue Originali torna il sabato, questa volta con Nadia Meroni e ancora con Dario Albertini per l'introduzione in lingua italiana alle 22 e leggiamo. Anzi, Nadia Meroni legge in tedesco e poi la domenica sera, stessa ora, le 22, Barbara Marchand che in italiano prima e in francese dopo ci porta simpaticamente e facendoci viaggiare attraverso bellissime atmosfere parigine in Francia, nelle pagine della letteratura francese. Grazie per l'ascolto. Lingue Originali, perché a Caffè Italia il venerdì, il sabato e la domenica, anche in lingua straniera, ci piace tanto raccontarvi storie.
Lingue Originali.